Your task today is to do a little exploration with some research papers that have been turned in that I would consider exemplars, great examples, perfect examples of good writing. It's at that point where hopefully you've been diving into this process and your independent work is paying off. Now I want to show you some examples and ask you to look at and assess three of these examples as you consider how you are writing your paper. So let's take a look at what you need to do today with those exemplar papers. Okay, thought I'd give you a little update. Everybody say hi to Mr. Connor. Connor, say hi. Oh yeah, there you go. We got to get him in between spit ups, so we thought we'd say hi. All right, now that we're back to the real work after that little welcome from our son Connor, your task today is really threefold. Okay, so you got to read the papers that are provided on the website, my website, with an eye for their use of the APA style. Take a look at and pay attention to how they integrate research. Take a look at and pay attention to how they use that research to make their argument. Try and identify what their argument is, identify what their thesis is. Take a look at their use of the counter-argument. It might be helpful for you to have the rubric open while you also read the papers because you're going to have to assess those. So the first thing you have to do is read them. The second thing is then to assess those papers given the rubric used for this paper. And then third, begin to think about your paper's organization and how you're comparing your research to these exemplars. Note that the research they use is not just Google searches. The research that they use is extensive research from our databases and from other sources. So keep that in mind as you particularly look at your research paper. Step one is read. There's no way that you can become a better writer without reading. There's no way that you can become a better writer without reading great examples of great papers. That's not to say you need to use their topic, but to read in terms of the style they use and the formal language that they use and the expectation of that writing as we move forward. Step two is to then take a look at that research paper and use the rubric that our department has provided that we use to assess these papers. Keep in mind, we're assessing you on claim, use of evidence, the connections of the pieces of evidence into your paper and to your topic in general, your writing conventions, and then your use of and dealing with the counterclaim. Those 5 pieces are the core assessment for this paper, and I want you to look at these exemplar papers with those 4 things in mind: claim, evidence, connections, conventions, and counterclaim. And then step 3 is, once you have read those papers, I want you to work with a partner to go to the Google form that's provided on my website and evaluate those papers as if you were scoring the paper itself. Discuss where the papers were strongest and where they were weakest, and then submit that information onto the Google form as well. This is an opportunity for you to do some evaluation and to see what those exemplars look like when compared to the rubric itself. Finally, just a reminder of these dates. We're coming up pretty close on them. The draft which is optional to get some preliminary feedback from me on Turnitin.com, is due by the end of the day on Friday, so I can look at it over the next weekend and then come back to class on Monday with some of that feedback for you. The paper itself is due on April 11th. So once you've got some of that preliminary feedback, then it allows you to dive in and really tweak and edit for that final paper to be due on April 11th. Keep in mind that's the final paper due date. It's not a draft due date. The draft due date is April 1st if you want to do that. Don't have to. The final due date is April 11th, and after that assessment, you'll have an opportunity again to take that feedback given from me to reevaluate that paper, and if you want, if desired, you can write a rewrite, and that's due April 29th. So we're just trucking along here, and wanted to remind you of those dates, so get to those documents and exemplars, and let's take a look and learn some things.